Sihor, the harvest of the river is her revenue, and she is the mart of nations. Be thou ashamed, O Sidon, for the sea hath spoken. Even the strength of the sea is saying, I travail not, nor bring forth children, neither do I nourish up young men, nor grow up virgins. As at the report concerning Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained at the report of Tyre. Pass ye over to Tarshish.
Welcome to Line by Line Bible Study. Sorry about that little delay there and that weirdness. We're continuing the book of Isaiah, chapter 47. Let's read through it. We'll pick it up at verse 8. We're kind of in the middle of everything, so try not to cover too much of the same ground. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground. There is no throne. O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind meal. Uncover thy locks, make bare the leg, uncover the thigh, pass over the rivers. Thy nakedness shall be uncovered, yea, thy shame shall be seen. I will take vengeance, and will not meet thee as a man. As for our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is his name, the Holy One of Israel. Sit thou silent, and get thee into darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans. For thou shalt no more be called the Lady of Kingdoms. I was wroth with my people. I have polluted mine inheritance, and given them into thine hand. Thou didst show them no mercy. Upon the ancient hast thou very heavily laid thy yoke. And thou saidst, I shall be a lady forever, so that thou didst not lay these things to thy heart, neither didst remember the latter end of it. Therefore hear now this, thou that art given to pleasures, thou that dwellest carelessly, that sayest in thine heart, I am, and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. But these two things shall come unto thee in a moment, in one day, the loss of children and widowhood. So they shall come upon thee in their perfection, for the multitude of thy sorceries, and for the great abundance of thine enchantments. For thou hast trusted in thy wickedness. Thou hast said, none seeth me. Thy wisdom and thy knowledge, it hath perverted thee. And thou hast said in thine heart, I am, and none beside me. Therefore shall evil come upon thee. Thou shalt not know from whence it riseth. And mischief shall fall upon thee. Thou shalt not be able to put it off. And desolation shall come upon thee suddenly, which thou shalt not know. Stand now with thine enchantments, and with the multitude of thy sorceries, wherein thou hast labored from thy youth, if so be that thou shalt be able to profit, if so be thou mayest prevail. Thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsels. Let now the astrologers and the stargazers, the monthly prognosticators, stand up and save thee from these things that shall come upon thee. Behold, behold, they shall be as stubble. The fire shall burn them. They shall not deliver themselves from the power of the flame. There shall not be a coal to warm at, nor fire to sit before it. Thus shall they be unto thee with whom thou hast labored. That was right. Even thy merchants from thy youth. They shall wander every one to his quarter. None shall save thee. And he turns again to Jacob. So, and this is directed at Babylon. Now, I could literally sit here and just read you Revelation 17 and 18. But I don't want to do that. But I'm going to go there, I think, just in a few things, just point out, in case you're not familiar with the passage. if you go to my website, oracleswithout.org, I have several versions of Revelation. There's an old acoustic version. There's the heavy metal version there is available, which isn't available anywhere else right now. It used to be available in a torrent, but I haven't been seeding it in a while because of the computer that was seeding is gone to computer heaven. Okay. So, just in the last verse before this week, it mentions these these sorceries and enchantments on actually this where we're starting out. We have the woman described here in Revelation 17. She's decked with these precious stones and pearls, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. They've been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. I think if I go here, I end up teaching it. I just wanted to compare. Especially 18, the judgment of the great whore. Where, one of the last lines was, "For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived." And it also seems to be a very, and of course the merchants that it mentions, right? As we went through, the merchants of these things, they were made rich by her. It's a picture of a very prosperous city but is also wicked. Prosperity and wickedness do not necessarily go hand in hand, but according to Ezekiel, let's go back there. It's a verse I've cited a few times, but sorry, I got a lot of phlegm in my throat for some reason. I should start talking before I get to the Bible study. Talking to myself is always kind of weird. Okay. Just go. Pride and vote. No, did I misspell something? I guess I did. One L in fullness, kids. Ezekiel 16:49. This was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom. Pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness was in her and her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. I was forgetting about that part. And they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore I took them away as I saw good. There is a haughtiness that goes along with the that kind of licentiousness, because you think once people start thinking they can do anything, and it doesn't matter, and they regard not heaven, we can do anything. They become, in their attitude, haughty, because they think there's no greater authority than they themselves, and if whatever they can do by power, and we can see that's the mentality of people in our society today. They want to take power to force their abominations and immorality on others and force others to accept them. I would never, to accept that a man was a woman would be for me to lie. You know what I mean? They're asking me to lie. To myself, give voice to a lie when it's, when it's not that I'm incapable of lying, but I don't much like being told to lie. There's something extra bad about that. The instruction to lie. Say it isn't so. Well, back to our passage. So, when Mystery Babylon says, I sit a queen and am no widow and shall see no sorrow. And this one is the same thing. She's given to pleasures. Babylon. She dwells carelessly, without a care, without a worry. She says in her heart, I am and none else beside me. There's the haughtiness. In the whole point about widowhood and stuff, Mystery Babylon is a queen. And therefore she is married to a king. That's not always the case, obviously, because it's funny the contrary. Because not every queen, like the Queen of England, I think her husband is a crown prince, or not a crown prince, but something else, right? He's not the king. There's the queen. You don't always get a king and queen. I don't know why. Whatever. But generally, if someone's a queen, you can figure there's a king there somewhere. And the king of Babylon. Prophetically, the king of Babylon is a type of Satan, a type of great enemy. In the book of Revelation, that's what she's referring to, is that she sits a queen, she is enthroned, and at her side is the king of Babylon, Satan himself, the Antichrist. Satan personified, you could say. It's not necessarily Satan himself, but that's the way I think of it. I think of the Antichrist as pretty much the presence of Satan in the world, like corporeally. Now, that could be a wrong interpretation, but I do think that's kind of your worst case scenario. So it's not wrong to think of worst case scenarios. When you consider prophecy, you're like, what could this mean? And there's often a wide array of possibilities. You look at things like the trumpets. Now, I take the trumpets in particular very literally, but you could try to interpret them in a less literal way. But as you do so, especially the earlier ones, it becomes questionable whether or not these trumpets could serve as a signal, since no one in that case would really understand what they meant, or understand that it was a signal. Because a lot of people will recognize the signs of the end times, but will not know what they mean. They won't understand what they're saying. They'll understand that what they're saying is a sign of the end. Men are going to be crying out to the mountains to fall on them. The sea and the waves will be roaring, and men's hearts will be failing them for fear and for looking after those things that are coming on the earth. But they're not going to really understand to know what they should do. And so many people who were set to be, who are at least outwardly presenting as Christians and claiming to be Christians, but have not forged any kind of real relationship with God, are going to become this apostate church that is received gladly by Satan, and who he seduces into worshiping him, into serving him. And they are going to think, wow, aren't we something? We are the greatest. I and none else. We are God's elect. We are the chosen. We have been exalted to this position because of our whatever. A lot of times people begin to credit themselves. It's one thing you got to be careful not to do. With greater gifts comes greater responsibility, and but people with great gifts often become corrupted by the gifts themselves. They become puffed up in their hearts, because of their either great intelligence or great ability or whatever. Or, if they have a winning personality, and they build a big church or something like that, they feel, wow, look at me, I'm just the greatest pastor ever. I got this down. The money train is rolling. And so, and I think, and if you look at it, given the pleasures, it's easy to point out things like sex and stuff like that, but I mean, the pleasures they mostly have thought of would be like the banqueting and that's where the Belteshazzar, the king of Babylon, who is destroyed by the Persians because Nebuchadnezzar has a reformation, and he does not represent Satan in the end of Babylon because his time passes. But Belteshazzar is at a great banquet, and he's drinking, eating out of the vessels of the temple of God. You know what I mean? If that isn't like, standing in the temple of God, making a show that he is God, there's something about that also. When Belteshazzar takes up the vessels of the temple, and then the disembodied hand writes on the wall. But, I think you think about the end times, the appearance of Satan, like how will that work? How will the Antichrist, let's just say, I say the appearance of Satan, I'm just so used to talking about it that way. I just want to give you the most shocking perspective on it. But when the Antichrist appears and begins making a show of himself as God, I don't think it's much different than when we have an unelected bureaucrat who goes out and starts telling people what holidays they can and can't celebrate, and what businesses can and cannot be open, and whether or not you should cover or not cover your face, and it's just the whim of a god. It's not. There's no rhyme or reason. I mean, the whim of a god, or it's just his pleasure. It's what it seems. But you see the way they all adore that authoritarian figure, even though he doesn't even have to be consistent to be adored. He's a liar. I'm not speaking of Dr. Fauci, of course. He's a liar and a deceiver. And yet he is adored by millions. I don't know if really millions, but the media certainly want millions too. So they prop him up. But there are people who have not just endured the pandemic with all of us, but who have embraced it and who love the government beginning to restrict people's freedom of movement, restrict people's ability to make a living. They delight in these things, in forcing people to wear masks. They proudly wear their mask. There are those who will proudly wear the mark of the beast. In the same way, you see how even a man of very little charisma and very little integrity can quickly be boosted to this exalted state through the just the propaganda of the media. And same thing with the current president. As you talk about someone who's been boosted by the media into his position. I mean, hell. But you see how easily people become fawning dogs at the feet of these men who are not particularly, there are much greater men in the world. There are greater men who are more worthy of human praise, let's say. I mean, of being praised. There are greater men in the world. There are better people than them. It doesn't matter. He's the one. And in their allegiance to this movement of authoritarianism and telling people what to do. I mean, because this is a great example. This is the nearest example in my lifetime of looking at how human beings would act in the end times. Because like the doctor is almost like a false prophet, fig type of figure, or I don't know if he's an antichrist type figure, but he is an antichrist. Dr. Fauci is an antichrist, for sure. He's a type of antichrist. He's not the antichrist. But if you look at the way he is portrayed as the savior, and people mock him on the other side as Saint Fauci because nothing he says is wrong, even when he lies. And the ability to get away with things and to continue to be adored and exalted and put on a pillar in the midst of all the evil he does, clearly is the same thing that you will find with Antichrist. And the same mechanics will be at work. People will unreasonably and blindly follow the person whom is put up there as this as this exalted figure. It's funny that the way I think I mentioned this in the study, or did I mention it? I don't remember if I mentioned it in the study, but they were talking on the news about the Pentagon, getting serious about these UFOs and stuff. And it's funny to me because, when I was young, UFOs were ridiculous nonsense. I mean, as far as the media, no one gave them any credence at all. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous as far as the public was, what the public was given to believe about UFOs was that it was nonsense. But now they're changing their tune. All over the media is, there's some UFOs out there. They're admitting, there's UFOs. It makes it. And for once in my mind, I just thought for a moment, I'm like, what if that's just setting up? What if it's just human beings setting people up for a big show? For our own manufactured Antichrist. Could that be? Well, that's not the thing I think likely. Meaning like a staged UFO landing. Some sort of staged event where it's like a show of this and that, and then usher in the world government through a enlightened alien who looks just like us because he's just a human that no one really knows. I don't think that would work because it's like somebody's going to know this. Unless they've raised him in a test tube somewhere down in a bunker, preparing this abomination of a human to become Antichrist. I don't know. But I think of the way I see people also obeying. Some people adore Fauci, but some people don't really agree, right? They don't really agree. They don't really want to take the jab. They don't really want to get that. But instead, because they threaten their way of life. And you understand this is very important. This is where you check yourself, and it would have been better to get the shot for health reasons immediately. Now that they're forcing you to, and you're saying, well, I don't really want to. Unless you say, like, no, I want to. Because I don't think this, for some people, I know it's a matter of life and death. And at this point, it's not clear to me why a healthy person would worry about such things, because as far as getting the jab, because it's like, especially if you're already had COVID, there's nothing but risk. If I were to take it, I'm taking nothing but risk, as far as I know, because I already had it. I already had COVID, possibly twice. and so what? So I should just do it again and just do what they tell me? So I don't want to. And I know other people who don't want to. But for the sake of their jobs, they will. And I wrote a song about that, and I feel bad a bit because I call such people cowards. But it is a bit cowardly, isn't it? When you do something against your own will and against your own interests that you don't want to do, but just for maintaining your lifestyle, just so you can keep that paycheck coming. That's cowardice, And so, and that's just precisely what it is. Now, and it's why would they do that? Well, they don't want their lives disrupted. And I understand. But I'm telling you, the mark of the beast is they shall not be able to buy or sell unless you have the mark. It's going to be another challenge in the same thing, except it's going to be a lot harder to resist. Because it's not just going to be like, oh, you'll lose your job. It's like, no, you'll lose your ability to even obtain food if you don't go along with this. So, well, I can't starve. I can't let my kids starve. I got to take the mark of the beast. And chances are, if you took the jab to prevent yourself from starving, and you won't starve. That's the thing that gets me, is like, nobody starves in America. There's something called food stamps, all right? You quit your job, get that, and then find another job that won't require you to be vaccinated. And if you can't, then pray and find a path. It's like, hey, if you want to violate your conscience, that's up to you. That's up to you, and it's on you also. But objectively speaking, it is cowardice. And also, if you have run with the footmen and they have wearied you, how shall you contend with horses? That's what Jeremiah said. If you can't resist, something, like I said, if you're convicted, if you're not convicted, if you believe it is healthy for you, then I'm not calling you a coward at all. I'm just saying, that's a difference of opinion. It's fine. And maybe you have a reason to need it because you have a pre-existing health condition that makes you think that COVID might be that's a personal decision. And all these decisions I say on a very personal level. It's like, I'm not saying whether you should or shouldn't have the jab. I'm saying if you have a conviction that you shouldn't and you violate that conviction in order to, maintain a lifestyle, that is not good. That's a bad sign about your moral character. And you should look into that. It doesn't mean you're done or anything, but I'm just saying, it's like what you do. I've done many things in my life I regret. You know what I mean? I wish I could go back and change it and not have done what I did. But after having done it, sometimes I wake up. Wake up. Oh, whoa, what was I doing? Why was I doing that? That was a big mistake, and I regret it. Like Peter denied the Lord, and he went out and wept bitterly, and he regretted that deeply. Especially because the Lord had predicted it. And he said, no, I never would deny you. And then he did. Peter denied the Lord. And if we act like cowards now, this is our chance to see what cowardice looks like and then to prepare ourselves for the future and to realize, okay, if the end times strike, I better be ready to be brave and to look starvation in the face and say, you know what? Because this is what I've always thought. And I had a dream like this. I had a dream when about a decade or so ago, where I was in the end times, and I was just sitting in my kitchen, and there was a big 5-gallon jug that was empty, and we had no access to water or something. There was no water. That was just my dream. There was no water. I was sitting there. What am I going to do about the water? And the 5-gallon jug was capped, which is another thing in this thing, because it started filling up, and there was no way for the air escape. That's why I said it was capped. It wasn't like it was just filling from the bottom. The water was just filling up that jug. And I fell into a trance, and God spoke to me in the dream, and all that happened in that trance, I don't remember a single thing. There were all kinds of important things said, and I always thought either I'll have that again in the future if I should see those days, or maybe that just wasn't the point. I don't know. But if God needs me to remember, he can bring everything to my remembrance or teach me things anew when I need them. The Holy Ghost will speak through you when necessary, as it says in Mark 13 and other places. And Elijah, when he was during the famine in the land during his time of prophecy, he was sustained by a widow woman, and also once he was in a cave and the birds brought him food. You know what I mean? So I don't need to buy or sell. The birds will feed me. If necessary. That's the trust I have in God. Will feed me. He made manna in the wilderness. Just because you can't buy or sell from the world, don't live in fear. God will feed you, especially in the end times. But now it's not like we're cornered. It's not like it's like, I'm facing a life or death situation. You're not yet. If it was, would it be any different? Should it be any different? If it was life or death, is that an excuse? Well, not. According to Revelation, there's no excuse for taking the mark of the beast. Those who take the mark of the beast, they're tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, in the presence of the Lamb. And where does it come? It comes from this love of pleasures. That's why a lot of Christians don't expect to go through the end times, because they've been sold a seductive lie about the rapture theory, which tells them they won't be here. And so that the pleasures they live in now, they expect to just keep going on. And so now you see they also willingly violate their conscience at times. And such, people to save their jobs and to continue that life of pleasure and ease. To continue my lifestyle of pleasure and ease, I will violate my conscience and I will do things I think are wrong. That's like a death sentence, man. If we start living like that, we're not going to, that's like in opposition to God. That is opposition to the truth. We should not live lives given to pleasures. We should not dwell carelessly. We ought to be careful. In a certain sense. We can have peace. We can trust the Lord. But we ought to be mindful of those things that are going on. And not say like, it doesn't matter. Whatever I do, whatever happens, happens. I have faith in Christ. So if I violate my conscience on every level, if I take the mark of the beast, well, won't I be saved anyways? I'm saved, so I can take the mark of the beast. No big deal. Because I'm the church. We are the church. We are God's people. We are the faithful followers of Fauci. We obey what the state says. We follow the science. We're doing what's right. Like I said, I have more respect for those people than for those who say, I know it's wrong, but I'm doing it anyways. I don't want to Heil Hitler, but everyone around me is heiling Hitler, so I better do it anyways. Wouldn't want to stand out in the crowd. I think I told you about the picture I saw. There was like a picture from Nazi Germany, and Hitler's car's going by, and every hand is up in the salute, except some guy sitting there with his arms folded like this. And it was like one in a crowd of it was just a mass of people. And that's very hard to do, to be that person, and to not join in the groupthink, and to be part, and not to join in the great whoring herself out to this little vile man who's taken over the country. There, Hitler. Here we have Herr Fauci. I mean, because it is like he's taking over the country, and it's ridiculous. If ever there was a government employee that needed firing, it was that guy. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. The church, the true church of God, will be mocked in the end times. Where is your Christ? Christ is here. God is here. Why do you yet wait for some other? Don't you see the miracles he performs? Don't you see how he's brought peace to the world? Take the mark of God, because they're not going to call it the mark of the beast. Take the mark of God and eat and drink and have plenty and live in pleasure again. Welcome to heaven. You don't have to sit there like some widow waiting for a husband that's dead and is never coming back. This Jesus is dead. He isn't coming back. You're a widow. Your children are all taken away. Two shall be in the field. One shall be taken. The other one left. They're taken to the battle where their blood will be spilled. They think they'll never sit as a widow because they've taken a husband, and they think this is it. This is it. Antichrist coming. That's it. That's the end of history, ushering in the time of God on the earth, a world full of peace and organized according to to bring about peace and prosperity forever. And there's a lot of prosperous images in the book of Revelation concerning Mystery Babylon, the merchants which are mentioned here, right? I shall not know the loss of children. And of course, for Babylon, the loss of children is her people being slain and her soldiers being butchered. But in one day, in a moment, children loss and widowhood. Yeah. Because her husband is taken away. The king of Babylon has fallen. And she is suddenly without a king. So also in the end, when Christ appears, he will devour with the sword of his mouth. What is that how it says? With the brightness of his presence devour? What is he? How does he devour Satan? Whom the Lord shall consume with the brightness of his coming. That's what it is. Whom the Lord shall consume with the brightness of his coming. Let's find that whole verse. Consume. That's what I was saying. Devour. Consume. Brightness. Hopefully I spelled it all right. 2 Thessalonians 2:8, of course. Then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. So I got the two verses jammed together. I got that. Forgot that spirit of mouth destroy, because the spirit. I knew it was something with the sword coming out. The spirit of his mouth is his word. That's 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 8. I just looked it up in the Bible collection, but I'm not gonna, do all this stuff. So I should have already done that. So in one day, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, the dead shall be changed. The dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Not any sooner. Now, I'm not going to get into a apologetic taking apart the rapture theory, but that 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 is actually pretty much the linchpin. When they interpret it, they have to butcher and bastardize what Paul is saying in order to continue to support the rapture theory. Because there's, all it takes is someone with a bit of reading comprehension to follow this. I want to talk, we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and by our gathering together to him. The gathering together to Christ. That's the subject. And those two things, the coming of the Lord and being gathered to him, are the same, one and the same event. They're just different aspects. He comes and we're gathered to him. And he wants us to know that the day of Christ will not be, not the rapture, just the day of Christ. No, the gathering. The day of Christ includes Jesus coming and our being gathered to him. That day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. will be made. A bargain will be offered, much like we are being offered now. Give us, obey us, and we'll give you safety. You'll be fine. Worship Antichrist, and everything's going to be great. He opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he is God, sits in the temple of God, showing that he is God. And I want to point out, she who said in her heart, that is 18. I was just thinking, was that 17 or 18? Yeah. Here's where she says it, verse 7. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her, for she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. That's why Babylon, that's why the end times apostasy is likened to Babylon, because Babylon was similarly minded. They thought of themselves as sort of invincible, untouchable, the greatest ever, but suddenly they fell. And it was their very, arrogance, pride, and being distracted by pleasures that made them vulnerable also. They shall come upon thee in their perfection. You're going to be, you're going to be, the widowhood and childless, the loss of children are going to come upon you in their perfection. What an interesting way of saying that. For the multitude of thy sorceries. We got the verse from Revelation, second to last from 18. We already looked at that, where it says, by thy sorceries. What does that mean, though? Some people point out fornikia, pharmakia. It means drugs, and not exactly. It does in the sense of way people will experiment with things like DMT and stuff, which I don't know much about except that name. I think that's the one, or there's something where people they take this thing and they all have the same experience where they see the little gremlins come out. Alex Jones talks about this. I don't watch his show, actually, oddly enough, even though I've been on it. But I've seen clips and they talk about this thing where these people take these drugs and they have these visions and they get these. And as Alex Jones says, it always ends up, they want, the aliens want you to kill babies, is what, apparently, that's why, supposedly in all those pagan religions, you end up with child sacrifice, because it always boils down to that, I guess. But I don't know. Not of our own children. You always sacrifice other people's children. That's the way, it's more powerful, I suppose, to sacrifice your own, right? If you're going to go in for that evil stuff. If you're going to go for truly black evil. Well, you could say, and of course it comes to mind Abraham. Abraham was ready to sacrifice Isaac. Was that evil? Well, he was willing to do that evil because he trusted God that he would turn it to good. That's the only thing I can think. Is that because God had commanded it, then it must be good. And because that's the thing, is that people will say things like, and I am definitely a believer in this. It's like, don't just do what you're told. If some authority tells you to do something, don't just do it because you were told to by an authority, right? If a cop tells you to jump off a bridge, don't do it. Just get arrested. Don't jump off the bridge. Just because they're an authority, it doesn't give them the right to tell you to do things that are self-destructive and so on and so forth, or evil. But again, they are just human authorities. They're humans, and their instructions should be questioned, and we have the right to question them because we are also people. And when they ask us to do things against our conscience or that we know are wrong, it's different. When God asks us to do things that seem wrong, it's not in some ways you think, like, is he testing me? Is he seeing Will I do something evil just because God commanded me? Will I kill if God commands? Because I've always affirmed, yes, I will kill. If God says kill, I will kill. Without pity, without reserve, without remorse. I will stomp the skulls of God's enemies if he so commands, because I would love to do that. I'm a very violent-hearted man that God has tempered with his gospel and with his peace and with his word, which tells me that I should not be a man of violence, So instead, I don't. I am obedient to what God has told me. That it was, turn the other cheek. How about that? Try turning the other cheek, and once you've mastered that, come back to me, and we'll see what we can do about the violence in your heart. But, it's funny, I got away. The whole point was about sorceries, drugs. I'm trying to figure out how I got to that. But anyway, killing. I don't want to leave that away first. The killing of things like, because Abraham came to mind, and I'm like, I can't ignore that. When God says, God isn't testing me on that level when he talks to me, because God knows that if I'm expecting from God, whatever he says to do is right. It's not like a man who can't judge. God knows. It is good. The things that God commands are good, even if they don't seem right. And so Abraham's obedience was right, and God stayed his hand, because it was right to obey God, but God didn't actually want him to sacrifice Isaac. But that was the thing, and some people don't like that story, because of the sacrifice involved, his willingness to give up his child just because God told him. You better be careful when you think God tells you things, though, huh? You better be careful. I'd want to be darn sure God was talking to me before I took any action like that. You know what I mean? But you better believe it's right to do what God says, even if it's contrary to what's normally. There's a time the scriptures say. There's a time to there's a time for every purpose under heaven. There's a time for peace and there's a time for war. There's a time to kill, too. The multitude of thy sorceries. Now, drugs. First of all, it doesn't, it says pharmakia. We derive our word pharmacy from that. That doesn't mean that pharmaceuticals are all automatically bad. But because they're not developed, here's why. When the ancients used, and the whole thing came about because of DMT and then killing children and all that. They take these hallucinogenic drugs and such to attempt to have religious experience and to contact entities in other dimensions. They're looking for contact, and God has told us how to contact him. You call in the name of Jesus. You don't take drugs and then look for otherworldly forces and look to, because you will encounter demons. That's where the demons are waiting for you. You take your psychedelic drugs and you go looking for a spiritual experience, the devil will find you. And he'll give you one. And so, sorcery in that sense of using drugs is sorcery. But in the sense of the medical profession and the drugs they use, because some people forbid the use of all pharmaceuticals, and they think all those things are bad. But we're not talking about magic here. Like when they develop certain compounds like acetaminophen or whatever, to relieve pain and all that, any more than alcohol is if used to relieve pain is being, that's not the same as abusing it for the sake of pleasure or for the sake of whatever. If we have drugs being used in a scientific way, meaning based on experimentation and knowledge of the revealed world, I do think the things that are derived scientifically, like truly scientifically, because they're based on the reality of the world, this is knowledge that God has made available to us. And so it's one thing when we're talking about using things that are developed for a particular purpose And it's not a religious thing. Even the vaccine itself at this time, it wasn't developed to be this sort of weird dividing line in society. It was supposed to help people. But the way people are using it, it's becoming like another mark of the beast. Because because people are being forced to take it against their will. And you shouldn't have to. If it's so great, why do you have to force people to take it? Because they're stupid? Is that really, that's what people think. Well, they're stupid. Bunch of redneck Trump supporters. That's not even true. Sorceries and enchantments. I don't know if there's any special word for the enchantment part of that. I haven't gotten anywhere today, have I? We're still on the 45 minutes in and we're on the second verse. That's okay. We've talked about actually a lot of what's in there, and so we're going to skim a lot of it, I think. We'll make sure we get through some verses and at least whatever. It's a subject we could go on a lot about, this great horror, this Babylon, this, all this stuff. Sorcery's here. Now, it's not pharmakia because it's not Greek, but it is in Revelation 18, pharmakia. And like I said, it's sorcery, not pharmacy. You know what I mean? As far as even in Greek, it's just because the word is pharmakia and we get our word pharmacy from it, it's not the same thing. Kashaf, magic, sorcery, witchcraft, it's the word for magic. There's no special, if you look in the context, Jezebel and her witchcrafts. And then we have Isaiah 47, the multitude of sorceries, sure. Isaiah 47:12, it comes up again. Micah, the context doesn't give us much insight on what it means. Now, enchantments. Company, association, spell. Chaber. It's used of a company, a band of bad priests in Hosea, a society, an association in Proverbs. It's only here. House of association, that is, share with a contentious woman, whatever. But then spell, an exclusive kind of meaning of verb. A loan of Babylonian so it's only used this way here. And I suppose that if it means society and also a spell, the idea of a spell is of bringing things together, right, to create something new. Like a society is the bringing together of people to create the society. Also the spell, I guess there's some sort of, it's interesting because it's like, enchantments. But honestly, if you look at that word in its root meaning here, it's kind of interesting because what is a church but a gathering together of people? For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. What were they deceived into doing? Went to all joining together in worshiping Antichrist. And joining together into the one world church of the end times, which is the apostate church, which is Mystery Babylon. People say, it's the Babylon is the Catholics. Babylon is that. You think those other denominations are better? I mean, marginally maybe, but overall, if you watch my studies, my opinion of the denominations is I reject them all. Because the very concept I just don't believe in. It's like, like I said, there's one chief cornerstone, Christ. You better take heed how you build on it. Well, a denomination prevents you from ever, really, if you want to reform that, you end up having to do a new denomination. You know what I mean? Which is fine, but the whole continually trying to form these structures that are permanent is just obviously not working. Because from the Reformation on, we've had nothing but a proliferation of new denominations. Really, I think there should be 0 denominations and all the churches would be different anyways. Because that's the thing. It's all local. It should be a local thing. That's the thing. Having centrally controlled and centrally planned church, I'm about as big a fan of the central planned church as I am centrally planned government. You know what I mean? The Holy Spirit is over the church. He is the guide of the church. Christ is the king. I don't need a pope or some other earthly figure standing in Christ's place. That is more akin to Antichrist. When someone tries to exalt themselves to a position that is not rightfully theirs. You know. Sorceries and enchantments and such. You know, I think of like the way they try to make churches grow big. Let's get, you know, like a company of priests. We gotta. The word means to gather, to bring together a society, and I don't see how you can see like something about churches in this. The way, you know, I remember I was talking to my wife the other day about good old Bill Hybels, because we lived in the suburbs of Chicago, nearby, very near to a church that was very near to where I lived and where we went to school was Willow Creek Community Church, which was the first big mega church that I had ever heard of. And Bill Hybels was the pioneer of this seeker-sensitive service. And the idea was to make services that were catered to people who were seeking, to basically gather more people in. I'm like, but you know, in some sense, like, why should I sit through something like that? Have you ever thought that maybe they're, you know, to start me? It's like coming in always to preschool. You know, preschool is where they try to get you to like, you know, or kindergarten, where they try to get you, you know, to like being at school. Get you used to the idea of being away from your mother all the time. That's what kindergarten. Kindergarten was devised by the Prussians, Kindergarten, to break the mother-child bond so that the child could be molded into an efficient tool of the state. That's the whole purpose of public schools also in our country, is to make your children obedient instruments of the state. And you see how during this pandemic, they've been very successful, because the generations that have been raised in public school, they are all very much just snap into exactly what they're told to do. And I've observed it over and over the years. I should have known better. I mean, I should have been more prepared for this mentally, as far as not myself, but seeing other people. Because I've been practicing civil disobedience for a long time, just in small ways. Right? I teach my children, when you see a line, don't just jump in it. You don't know if it's a line to get on the boxcar to go to the damn gas chambers. Don't just jump in line. And that, I mean, literal lines. We would go to wrestling tournaments and we'd see people lined up. I'm like, let's go to the front of the line and see where this line goes. Because there's no one like, there's no queue. There's just people have organically lined up. And I see they were lined up behind a conversation that was happening in a door that was not going anywhere. And you walk past that door another 10 feet, and then you go into the area where registration was. But people were lining up for registration, thinking, oh, it must be a long line to get registered. They were just lining up behind some random person talking to someone else. There's like a group of people talking, and then suddenly people are milling around in a line for no reason. They're not waiting for anything. And that time I even had pity. I went back and said, guys, this is not a line. The registration's in here. Come in here. And some people were so reluctant to get out of line, they just wouldn't. Because they've been trained from their childhood. Get in line. Do what you're told. Obey the people above you, your betters. And they will get in line. And when you're not in line, they'll hate you. You know? I'm kind of speaking symbolic of lines then too, but the schools have taught the children to be obedient little pawns. And so we have adults running around who have become obedient little pawns. I thank God I've taught my children not to be obedient little pawns. I tell them, like, don't get in the line till you know what it's for and that you want to be in it. You know? Don't assume that just because you're in a place that's you know, and it's a small lesson. It may seem kind of silly, but to me it means something. It's like, I know that when I was a kid, I was very obedient. I had to learn disobedience. You mean to authority. I had disobedience towards God and towards righteousness. But I mean to buck authority of men. You know, to say like, yeah, the leader of this church, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. Just because he's in a position of authority doesn't mean he belongs there. Just because someone's up high doesn't mean God has put them there. Or let's say God puts everything in its place. But he put them, but it doesn't, just because God has someone in authority, it doesn't tell us the reason he's in authority. It doesn't tell us that God may put him in authority for us to disobey. Just like Peter in the book of Acts and the apostles, when they were commanded to stop healing people in the name of Jesus. Now you judge whether it's more right for us to obey God or you. What do you think? Oh boy. They use enchantments and sorceries to seduce people, to bring them in, to corrupt their minds, to make them into the obedient little pawns they want them to be, to make them ready to receive and worship Antichrist, to make them neglect their salvation, to neglect the prayer, to neglect their devotion to the Lord. You know, they don't have all those things working in them, and they're vulnerable. You know, this is people robbed and spoiled. Are all of them in prison houses. Therefore, pray and none delivers. They're just ready and ripe to be plucked. When Antichrist comes, he will have no trouble at all instituting the mark of the beast. Because lesser abominations I have seen already. You know, like I'm saying, so well, it's different. They wouldn't do that. No, they will. They will. Not that there won't be resistance. That's what frightens them, is because they think there might be too much resistance. Because there's not a heavy enough hand. But they see how obedient the people are, and they know they're getting close. You know, all they got to do is just keep hammering away at the children. Get the children to be more obedient. Make them wear masks. When I told my daughter to go to school, make sure you pull that mask off as often as you can. Just let it fall or whatever, but you defy in every little way you can. Make it impossible. Encourage others to defy. Encourage others to be unruly in that respect. Because they can't police everybody. You know, but if you leave me alone to just fight on my own, yeah, they'll get you. Thou hast trusted in thy wickedness. Thou hast said, none seeth me. You know, they don't think that anybody. There's no God observing. Thy wisdom and thy knowledge hath perverted thee, and thou hast said in thine heart, I am and none else beside me. You know, I'm kind of exhausted, and I think about jamming this verse. I almost feel like I want to start in verse 10 tomorrow. Which we may do. Let's just look at it a little here. So I'm going to just chill and realize, no, you're not getting through all those verses in 5 minutes, and you're not going to take this study 10 minutes late today. No. Thou hast trusted in thy wickedness and said, none seeth me. So trust in your wickedness, you know. In the wicked things you do. I wonder if they think those things are wicked. You know what I mean? I remember I went into a store with my wife, actually my wife went into a store. After I saw the police arrive, I went in the store to go make sure she didn't go with the police and went with me. So I went to fetch her. Because I thought, she won't get out of this, you know, because she's got conviction, you know, power of conviction. But I remember someone was just saying, ma'am, it's just to keep you safe and us and you safe. This is just to keep everybody safe. It's a lie. It's not to keep anybody safe. It's nonsense. It's all about keeping you under their control, or placing you under control, getting you used to being controlled, getting you used to being obedient, not only as a child, but as an adult. They want to see how good that obedient servant training was going that you took in school. It hasn't always worked so well. But you need more, they need more arbitrary rules which don't make sense. Because for children, children are safe because they're children, because the coronavirus has almost more children die from the flu. Right? Period. On a yearly basis. So, it's comparable to the flu. It's within range, but more currently. Last I heard, it was more from the flu for children under 18. And those who die are often have health problems and so on and so forth, and God help their family, and much love to them. Because I know it's a real disease that kills, but it's a BS disease as far as the way they're using it. You know what I mean? They're using it to BS us. Bullshit. I shouldn't abbreviate. I mean, I'm saying bullshit, aren't I? They're bullshitting us about it. Oh, it's dead. It's hard. Everyone needs to mask. It's so dangerous. It's so dangerous. We got to cover our faces to be safe. We can't get near anybody to be safe. You got to do what we say. You can't celebrate Christian holidays to be safe. You just get used to that. In the Roman times, the Christians met in the effing tombs, because they were forbidden to worship. But this generation, they bowed before the state. Yes, sir, we'll cancel church for as long as you say. I hope every one of their churches dies. I hope all their congregations never return. And I hope those pastors wind up in the unemployment line because they are a disgrace to the name of Jesus Christ. They are a disgrace. These pastors close down their churches. I mean, if you humored it for a bit, I understand. The first couple, nobody knew what was going on at first. Exactly. How bad is it? How bad is it? You want to be helpful. You want to, but on the side, but after a while you realize this is just BS. This is just, because politicians and crap, they like to do things so they can pretend like they made a difference. You know what I mean? Look busy. That kind of crap mentality. Just, let's, what do we do? We got to do a bunch of things so we could say we did some stuff to fix the problem. Then we could say we made the problem better. Because there's no other world where we can check. Well, actually, there is another world where we can check other countries where they didn't do it like us. That's how we know it's bullshit. Just like this, the states. And to me, it's all very appropriate to this Bible study. And it may be current events, but it's so important. I usually am not a current events guy. You listen to my old studies, I almost never talk about politics. But these events are they're a seminal experience of my life. Yeah, I mean, it's an experience of my life. I mean, it provoked me to such action. As far as the singing, like I said, I went to my state capitol for the first time. Just to protest. Never been to a protest. Never protested anything in my entire life. I said, oh, no, you can't work for a living anymore, not you. Your job, it's not essential. Not to us. You arrogant pieces of garbage. That job is essential to somebody else. Because it's their friggin' livelihood. Oh, no, it's not important. You're not important. You're human garbage and disposable. Because that's how they look at people. It's just, and honestly, in some ways, some people think this is all about killing people, about reducing the population of the world. I don't know. We'll see. Someone asked me, the vaccine, is this going to kill a bunch of people? It's like, people think it's killing a lot of people. I don't see the body bags. That's, here's the thing. When you have an exorbitant amount of people dying, that gets reported on. You get the bodies stacked up. And whole thing. None saith me thy wisdom and knowledge it hath perverted. Here's the thing. Wisdom and knowledge. Follow the science. They think because of what we know, we're so intelligent, we're so smart. Look at the wise. We have the wise. Let's just do what the wise say. The wisdom can be perverting. Because, oh, tell us, wise one. Oh, I'll tell you exactly. You know, they tell and they flatter them, and they think they themselves to be that wise as they're told they are. You know, I do think that it's like, you know, they have, you know, I can't help but compare it to the medical situation because of their learning and their training. They think, well, we know what's best. That's why early on I was saying that, you know, this is like Moby Dick as far as these retarded doctors. Not all doctors, but these people in the bureaucratic doctors like Dr. Fauci and stuff. You know, they're perverting this. They think, well, I know all about infectious disease. And so how do we beat the virus? You know, how do we stamp it out? You know, it's like going to Captain Ahab. Well, I know all about hunting whales. And here's how we do. We just go hunt down the white whale. And if the entire crew dies in the process and everything implodes, who cares? The point is to get the whale. That's what I'm saying. This is what the quest to destroy the virus is like, this stupid hunt for Moby Dick, whereby we're destroying everything in the name of getting the virus. You know, in the name of eradicating the virus, which is not possible. It was maybe possible in the first few weeks of the pandemic. The window that is, when you have some sort of virus escaping from a lab, you have a very brief window of opportunity to contain that. And the Chinese, the most scientific nation in the world, because they don't believe in God over there, they believe in science. They couldn't do it. They couldn't contain the virus if they indeed wanted to. I think they wanted the virus to get out so that they could destroy the president who was most threatening to them as far as to their ambition to displace American empire in their zone of the world. I know that's such a bad ambition, but they're bad people, I'll tell you that. I mean, I don't object to them thinking like, hey, the South China Sea, that's like your Mediterranean. Would you like Chinese submarines sailing around the Gulf of Mexico? No, I don't want Chinese submarines in the Gulf of Mexico. I don't want them off the coast of New England. I don't want them off the coast of Hawaii or California. And why would they want our battleships and carriers in their sea? So I do get that. I'm very sympathetic of that. Like I said, I'm not a hawk by any means. Why would they want us there? You know, we fell into this world empire from World War II, and now we have to deal with it. But it's crumbling because we can't maintain it, and because we could maintain it, but our leaders just don't understand what the hell we've got. The last guy did. He understood. He understood the American empire, and he was, trying to be as least offensive as possible, not killing people everywhere we go. But because there's a certain responsibility that comes with having that empire. You can't just abnegate your responsibility. It's one thing to say we need to get out of certain places, but there's another thing like how you do it. You have to respect the people you made promises to. I mean, our country has become whatever. Now I'm getting overly political. Okay. But see, the wisdom and knowledge perverts because it makes us think we know everything. You know what I mean? And then something new comes along. You know what I mean? Or like with the medical thing, they're experts in the medical field of fighting viruses. Or just like Captain Ahab, I know how to hunt whales. But whether or not you should hunt that whale is the question that guy is not an expert on. You know what I mean? Whether or not it is worth it to destroy the economy, to fire millions of people, just to get them to take a vaccine that many of them don't need, don't want, and the damn pandemic is over. Except right now the pandemic is 100% bullshit. There is no pandemic. There is only the new cold virus. That's it. There is no pandemic, just a cold virus that's new. And it's mutating because they decided they used the leaky vaccine. And that means people who got vaccinated still carried the virus. And in fact, the vaccine helped select for vaccine resistance. Because that's how evolution works, kids. Viruses do evolve, into new viruses. They don't evolve into monkeys, but they do evolve into other viruses. I do believe in that. I believe in microevolution, which means on the small scale, because God made a flexible world that it moves and changes and stuff. I don't know. If it weren't for certain people who are very smart and not having a vested interest in like belief in God, who say that they think evolution as on a macro level is just purely crap and absolute bullshit. If there weren't for those people, I'd probably consider it. But I don't, because there are enough intelligent people who don't have a vested interest who I think specifically of Berlinski. If you're wondering who I'm talking about there, is David Berlinski. It's a good guy. A lot of interesting content from that guy. Okay, so all right, we'll begin with verse 11 tomorrow. All right, thanks for joining me in this study. Look forward. I went 10 over just like I said it would. Thanks for joining this study. Hopefully we'll finish this chapter tomorrow. I don't know. I think it's something about this chapter, because I do feel like our society is a lot like Babylon, given to pleasures, full of prosperity, full of knowledge, but still corrupted in all those things. You know what I mean? Corrupted by all those things. All the technology corrupts us. All the knowledge, all the wisdom we have, it perverts us. Because it makes us lift up in ourselves, and we don't have the humility that we ought to have as human beings to realize that even in all our wisdom, we still really don't know what's going on. We still don't really know the answers. This is the BS. I'm sorry I'm swearing so much today. But this is the bullshit promise of progressivism for the past 100 years. Is that if we get the right, brilliant people, we got to get not JFK. Was it JFK? Yeah, JFK had his brain trust, or is that... No, that was, I thought, FDR. Whatever. The president, at some point, he's got his brain trust. They get all the smart people together, and they'll plan out the economy. They'll plan out everything, and everything will be... But you know what? That never, ever worked. Thomas Sowell even went over the failures of the New Deal. Because it failed in every step of the way and made everything worse. People always talk about like it's this great thing, but it didn't work. And they think that they can plan the whole thing in the world. And it's an arrogant foolishness. They don't have the capacity. They're not that wise. But the wisdom that they do have leads them to think that they're smart enough to do everything. And it's a lie, and they've been promising that if you just give us control of your life, and we'll give you paradise on earth. Take the mark. Just do what we say. Do as we command you. Even if it violates your principles, even if it violates your belief in God, do what we say, and we'll make heaven on earth for you. Just give us the power. Give us the authority. Let us do what we're doing. And they keep saying this, and it never happens. They just keep bringing nightmare upon nightmare. Anyways, that's the end. Tomorrow we'll pick up verse 11, something like that, all right? Hopefully we can finish this chapter. All right, and where's my music? Here we go. What chapter was this? I'm supposed to declare what it is. 23. Isaiah 23.
The harvest of the river is her revenue, and she is the mart of nations. Be thou ashamed, O Sidon, for the sea hath spoken. Even the strength of the sea is saying, I travail not, no bring forth children, neither do I nourish up young men, nor bring up virgins. As at the report concerning Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained.